Hi, today let's talk about containers. In the last 5 to 7 years, a lot has changed for application developers, mainly around their interest and love with the containers. And now they are almost everywhere. Maybe in super easy words, we can say that containers, or maybe sometimes we hear that containers are like light versions of virtual machines. And containers isolate application components and their dependencies while simultaneously providing the scalability. But please remember, the containers are not an alternative to virtual machines. They're a whole new way of developing and deploying applications to full-scale production environments. Actually, the demand for them comes from the application developers who mainly enjoy to, the ability to create small application components that can be scaled, repaired, replaced, and released individually without much troubles. Rather than doing version releases, maybe let's say every 6 or 12 months after a huge cycle of testing and all those things, containers support an agile development in which pieces of the applications can be pushed from programmer to production in a very accelerated manner. The reason behind the briefing of containers is because for you to understand the flexibility containers are bringing to the developers. So, when we talk about containers, the first thing that usually comes to our mind is Kubernetes. And we all know that Kubernetes is open source. So, why don't we just use the upstream version? Why are people and organizations investing on a commercial or enterprise product to adopt them? Let's see. While we know that Kubernetes and containers are part of a very fast-moving ecosystems of new products and ideas in the software development, and while there are some large open source projects, there are a lot other components that thrive into the ecosystem. While the details behind the terminology and vocabulary are all new and maybe sometimes foreign to the business leaders, we should we should see that the same DevOps model that puts developers in the driver's seats when it comes to the deployment and provision of application also means that there are many other voices that come up to the table when it comes to the points like choosing the tool sets and the operations model. The discussion cannot be like, okay, let's install Kubernetes, and here are some Docker images, and you can start working. It doesn't work that way. Actually, it cannot work that way. Instead, what we'll end up discovering is that a whole world of bits and pieces that the developers are asking in order to optimize the work. IT groups in the organizations that don't have direct experience with integrating all these tools together may find it easier to lean on a commercial product, which has the full support rather than dive into the world of open source container management with a difficult learning curve and a fast pace of upgrades and updates. The other reason to consider commercial container management is that the complex enterprise requires a full application deployment solution. And Kubernetes is just one part. It doesn't do a lot. For example, when it comes to actually building an application for deployment, it doesn't handle the management of underlying data engines. It doesn't have an overall monitoring and alerting system. And it doesn't even, it doesn't help secure the communications between different containers. While technically, it may be possible to assemble pieces from open source projects and other commercial projects into one larger solution, starting with a supported commercial product that meets the needs of complex enterprise from the day one, can ensure that the focus of the development and operations team is on the applications and not on the mechanics of building and making sure the infrastructure is running properly. This is one of the main important reasons why organizations are leaning towards the commercial products and not just relying or not fully towards upstream Kubernetes. Hope you're convinced. Share your comments.